Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining me on this episode of the Peaceful Presence podcast. I'm Olivia Figuered. I created this podcast as a place to share teachings and testimonies to help you reconnect with God and rediscover the purpose and the peace and the power that is within us all. But today's episode is going to be a little bit different and a bit personal. And I just feel it on my heart to share a little bit about my story this last year. This week, 1 year ago, marks a pivotal moment in my life. And this week has brought up a lot of emotions for me. My sister Monica was my very best friend. She was somebody I never even considered doing life without. She made everything more fun. She was so supportive to me and to our whole family. And she really was the anchor for all of us. On October 10th, 2023, I drove home from her house, which, funny enough, she lives pretty much right across the street from me. But for whatever reason, I had my car at her house that day. And so when I drove home that night, I pulled into my garage and I remember just sitting in my car crying, but they were happy tears. And I sat there in my car thanking God for the miracle that I was witnessing in her. And I was just so excited because everything looked like it was getting better. And I was excited for the testimony of healing that we were going to share together. But what I didn't know was when I said goodnight to her that night, that was going to be the last time I said goodbye to her. And it's funny because that used to be something that my sister would often say to me. She would always say, you never know when the last time will be that you do something. And she had 4 kids and I have 4 kids. And I think she would tell me that in reference to them. Like, you never know the last time that you hold your child because, one day they're just too big for you to carry them. Or you never know when the last time you changed your child's diaper would be. And I always thought about that, especially as my kids were changing into different stages of their lives. In fact, I have a 10-year-old son that, will sometimes still hold my hand in public. And I think about what she said and, just you never know when the last time will be of something. And so on October 10th, 2023, I didn't know when I said goodnight to Monica that was going to be the last night that I would have said that to her. So to back up a little bit for anybody who doesn't, know me very well, I have always had a heart for God. And at the age of 17, that's when I was really more focused on having a relationship with him and started leaning on him for whatever was on my mind that day. But up until a few years ago, the things I leaned on him for were the more trivial things in my life. I would go to him for everything. In school, I would say, help me do good on this test, or give me strength when my heart was maybe broken from a relationship. I've been in the sales industry for a number of years, and I would always go to God to find business for me. I mean, we would get in groups with other people and they would all have their marketing strategies. But for me, I would take it to God. I always trusted that he was my best marketer. He knew what I had to offer and he knew how to bring the right person to me. And honestly, that approach, it never failed me that I can recall. I may have had times where I had to wait longer than others, but it was just something that I trusted in. So in 2021, I was either September or October. That was the time where my faith and trust were really put to the test. The summer of 2021, so a few months before that, my sister was complaining that her stomach felt funny, and she would describe it sometimes like she felt there was a baby in there. But this time period was a little bit on the heels of COVID. So it was just really difficult to get into the doctors. And, without getting into all of that, I think we just might have thought that she had some sort of bug and it would pass. But as the months went on, her condition went from feeling a little weird to this is serious. She noticed she was coughing quite a bit. She felt like her stomach was growing, and it became kind of hard for her to breathe. And then it became very difficult for her to walk. And all of this happened in a real quick time frame. She did make an appointment with a doctor, but while she was waiting to get into the doctor's, it got to the point where she really couldn't walk from one room of the house to the next without having to sit down and catch her breath. And even standing for more than 1 minute would be difficult for her because she had to sit down to catch her breath. And so we looked up the condition, and I remember she thought she might have fatty liver disease. And we kind of joked about it because, that doesn't sound like the sexiest of terms. Um, but then she did go to the doctors. And one day I remember sitting at my desk and I was working, and I got a text from her. And it instantly, it made me sick to my stomach and scared. She was told that she had stage 4 colorectal cancer with innumerable and inoperable tumors in her liver. And it had also spread to her lungs, which explained the coughing. And her doctor at that time, I guess he was a little bit cold, basically told her, there's really nothing we can do. And that did not sit well with my sister. She's always been a leader. She's always been a fighter. And her response was, that person will not be my doctor. And while she researched to find a new oncologist, the first thing she asked from us was to get family or friends, anybody who wanted to come and do a prayer rally with her. Now, I am not much of a public person. It may not seem like that now, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm not used to broadcasting that out in public. But that's not how my sister was. And I can see now that God used her and her public openness to open the hearts of many. The turnout to this prayer rally was really incredible. But I have to tell you, when she was first diagnosed, I was really scared. We didn't understand how this could be. She had 6 years prior to this discovered a polyp, and they did find out that it was cancerous, but they removed it all. And she was diligent about getting her colonoscopy every year. And in fact, just months before this, she had a clean colonoscopy. But what that colonoscopy didn't show was that something had spread to the outside of her colon, which then went to her liver and to her lungs. So hearing this news initially, it didn't make sense. But I did what I always knew to do. But this time it wasn't for something trivial. For the first few nights, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I was just sobbing because I couldn't lose her. What would our family be like without her? What would we do? She lives across the street from me, like I mentioned. And I remember thinking, like, I can't live here anymore. I'm not going to be able to drive down this road and pass her house every day. And plus, we have a lot of boys. She has 3 boys of her own. I have 4 boys. And, there's with the exception of my sister, my niece, and my mom in our family, she was my person. We were different in some ways, but in many ways, we were so, so similar. So after a few nights of waking up and crying, one night I just told myself no more. And like clockwork, I woke up every morning and I just immersed myself in healing scriptures. As I mentioned, I have 4 kids, and my youngest at the time was probably, 2 or 3. So I had to get up early to do this, but I didn't even need an alarm. I woke up automatically early and I just went straight to it. I read inspiring books. I read the Bible. I listened to uplifting stories. I typed up healing scriptures and I posted them all around my house and her house. I latched on to everything that gave me hope. And my mom and I, we were on a group text with my sister, and we would just continuously feed her hope. And I do believe it worked because very quickly, even before she found her new oncologist, we did some things that I believe started to change her situation around. And when she did find a new doctor, we did a combination of conventional and unconventional things. And she started getting better very fast. The girl who couldn't walk from one room to the next was within a couple of weeks walking up her steep driveway once or twice a day. And then we watched as time progressed, her tumors started shrinking drastically. And I really was planning for her miracle testimony. I also have to share that between myself, my mom, my sister, her children, my dad, we were all getting signs and confirmations. And it was so exciting when we did, because it kept that hope in motion. And in the very beginning, my mom and sister and I kept getting messages of having no fear. And that message just stuck with us in the beginning. And then one of the first clear signs that I had from God was around that message of not giving into fear. And so just to share that with you, I remember being in my living room and I was changing my youngest son's diaper. And so I was on the floor and I saw something underneath the couch. I pulled it out and it was this card to a game. The game, I happen to have it here. It was called Band. And so, sometime before this day, my little son had been playing with it. And there's a bunch of cards that are in this box. And anyhow, I'm down on the ground and I'm changing his diaper. I see something underneath the couch and it's one of the cards. And this particular card, I pull it out and it says, if you can see it, it says fear and then the circle with the line through it, which to me meant no. And out of all the cards that were in this box, I mean, there's over 200 of them in there. For that to be the one card that was underneath the couch, I knew God was giving me a message. And at the time that I pulled that out from underneath the couch, I was actually in conversation with a friend of mine about my sister. And I just knew that this was a sign of God saying, have no fear. And it ignited something in me. And I knew at that moment that I didn't need to give in to that anymore. And of course I had some moments where it crept back in, but I guess from that point on, I just really trusted. And then I have, my sweet niece, she always used to say, why do we worry about things that haven't happened yet? Because we're just, creating that in our brain. And between her saying that and that message that I got or that sign that I got, I just really relaxed. And even though my sister did do some chemotherapy, she really handled it all very well and lived life to the fullest every day. She would even say that if somebody didn't tell her that she was sick, she wouldn't have even known it. And there were many other signs and faith rooting things that took place during those years, and I don't discredit any of them. So fast forward to August of 2023, things started to change for the worse, and she had to go in to the hospital for a procedure. And without getting into all of that, everything really wound up going downhill pretty quickly from there. One thing after another got worse, but outwardly, at least, she was still fighting. But then there was me. I of course hated what I was seeing, but my faith felt like it was unshakable. And when I look back now, as much as I was researching things and soaking up hope for her, it was actually doing a work in me. I used to watch TV every night and I was, wrapped up with the latest news for the day. In fact, I would go to sleep to Dateline being on at night, which, 9 times out of 10 was about a murder that had taken place. But when she was diagnosed, I turned it all off. I couldn't do it anymore. So it didn't matter to me when it didn't look like she wasn't getting better. And it didn't matter to me when they told her at the hospital that there was nothing more they could do and that we should send her home on hospice. I remember when they said that, I thought, good, we're done with this place. I'm done with you opening her up and poking her. And I wanted her home, and I figured we would do this on our own. And I was determined when they brought her home to figure out a plan to get her better. I would not lose hope. So on October 11th, 2023, I got up in the morning and I was so excited to go to her house because we just had this great day the day before. And I know people always, can have a peak before things get worse. But in those 2 years, I had never seen her in pain like I did that particular day. And it was different. She could hardly talk. At one point, though, she did say to my mom, she said, "I don't know what to do." And I don't know if that was a choice that she was getting to make. I just don't know. But by the time the evening rolled around, something was changing in her and I could see it. And there is a visual that stays with me because it was the very It was the very last time that we locked eyes, and I could tell something was different, and so we locked eyes, and I said, "Monica, do you want me to call 911? Do you wanna go back to the hospital?" And she just frowned at me, and I don't know if that frown was, "No, I don't wanna go back to the hospital," or if it was some realization of what was happening. I don't know, but I've often wished that those weren't my last words to her. But I also know, some people don't even get the opportunity to have last words or lock eyes one last time. I wish I would have told her that I loved her in that moment. I wish I would have told her that she was the best big sister that I could ever have. But but I have replayed that moment in my mind, and I have said those things to her that I wish I would have said, and perhaps there was a reason that I stayed strong up until the very end and never gave in to accepting what was happening, or admitting what was happening in front of her, maybe is the better way to say it. Um, so that night she wound up, she passed away. But she did so surrounded by her family. And without this coming across in the wrong way, there was something very, very beautiful about how everything happened if that was the way that it had to go. But I will also say that at the moment that she passed, I still had faith. I've read and listened to so many near-death experience stories, and I still was hoping. And some people might listen to this and think, boy, I'm crazy, crazy to have so much hope when somebody gets a diagnosis like that. But I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I can stand here today and tell you that because of the hope, I know we were blessed with 2 additional years that we might not have had. And I don't feel like her story is over. I made a reel on this earlier this year because I often start my day with a walk. And as I was walking, I kept having a memory of when I used to do track and field in high school. And one of the things I used to do were relay races. And as part of a relay, you run your part of the race and then you pass that baton on to the next person. And I kind of felt like that's what had happened with all of this. It was like she handed us, everybody whose life she touched, the baton and said, run with it, run with what I gave you. And in her eulogy, I also shared this, and I still believe this so strongly. I don't say or nor do I feel that she is gone. I feel like she's on one side of the coin and then we're on the other side, but it's all still the same coin. And I really believe that. There's a lot of numbness when you're in the trenches with somebody. And even after her passing, there was so much to do, whether it was, planning a service or getting through the holidays. And so I feel like now as time has gone on, it has allowed me to feel and process a little more. And what I've come to realize is, I don't think many of us escape this life without having some disappointments and heartaches or tragedy. And everybody has a story. Everybody's been through something that's changed them. There's a poem by Robert Frost that I always loved, and it starts with saying, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I could not travel both." And then it ends with saying, "I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." So in my mind, I have always, pictured that poem, with the fork that's in the road. And you can take a tragedy or a disappointment or a challenge, and you can choose to go one way with it and just go down that rabbit hole. Or you can take it and let it be a part of you to be a part of something greater and more purposeful. So that's partly why I started this podcast. It would have been really easy for me to be mad at God regarding the outcome of last year. But ironically, I didn't feel mad, but I did feel so confused. I mean, what were all of those signs and confirmations for? And there were so many of them. And how could I have been, crying my eyes out the night before her passing, giving thanks for the miracle that I thought that we were witnessing in real time. And how could I go on to tell people to trust or go to God when I didn't get what I was hoping for? Of course, all of these thoughts came to me. But what I did have that I couldn't understand was a strength and a peace, and it just didn't make sense. The me 2 years before, when I first found out about her diagnosis, the one who got sick to her stomach and was shaky and full of fear, was not the same me as a year ago or even today. So my sister Monica gifted me something in those 2 years, because there would have not been many people who could have yanked me out of my routine, got me off the couch from watching TV at the end of a long day, or got me to shut off my Dateline before bed. Or there wouldn't have been very many people who could have gotten me to get real serious real fast with God, to grow my faith, to root my faith, and to want to root my faith and trust in Him more than her. So her journey, in a way, was a gift to me, because I can sit here today and I can tell you that I know I'm not the only person who didn't get a prayer answered the way that they wanted it to. And I'm not the only person who has gone through heartache and disappointment or a tough challenge. But what I can say is that God got me through it. And it doesn't mean I don't cry. And it doesn't mean that I don't have moments that hurt, like, feeling like it got punched in the gut type of hurt. But I do have a little bit more perspective now. And I trust that in time, I'm going to have even more perspective. And I also trust that her story is not done. I had always wanted to start a podcast. My degree was in journalism. And, there was a time where I wanted to do the good news segment of the day, but that just didn't seem to sell in the news world that I briefly worked in. But I couldn't just let everything that I had grown in those last 2 years go by the wayside. So I started this podcast with the idea of, I want to talk about God, and I want to talk about the challenges that people are going through. I want to help teach people things that I know, and I want to be taught things by others to continue to root my faith. We're all here to learn from each other, and there's always somebody that's a step ahead of you, and then there's always somebody that's a step behind you. And I just wanted to make this be a platform for just that. I started it off with just my mom, because my mom is my teacher and has a way to explain spiritual things to me that resonate with me. And I just thought, I'm going to capture her wisdom. And I started it off with that. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I believe it's what I'm to be doing now. And it will carry on Monica's story in one way or another. I don't think anybody's story is over if you don't let it be. I think we're all in this together, no matter what side of the coin we're on. And I think my sister taught me that, and will continue to teach me as I go and as I grow. And I think the key is keeping our hearts open and paying attention to the whispers. If you stuck around to listen to this story, I just want to say thank you. I know that it may not be the most uplifting content today, but I do hope it encourages you to know that if you're going through a challenge or a heartache, that you're not alone, and that together we can get through it. And if you appreciate content like this on this podcast, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. It helps encourage me, and I hope in the process of spreading this podcast that it encourages others. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.